All right, we're back here for round five, the afternoon portion of the Swiss, and we have a new guest, first timer with us, Justin Porchas, and probably first timer for a lot of you. He's had a couple GP experiences. Some of you might recognize him, but for me personally, I've known Justin for quite some time now. But the thing that really stands out for me was I remember a few years ago we drove up to an RPTQ in Northern California, and I think I was out of the tournament in about an hour and a half. I don't even sure I won a game. And I think you played turn 2 Growth Spiral, turn 3 Wilderness Reclamation,
Oh, I forget.
turn 4 Teferi Hero of Tarmonaria, Nexus of Fate, as you're opening your first 4 turns, something like 11 games in a row. That's what I remember.
Yeah, it was a lucky day.
That's what stuck with me, and you actually qualified from that. But that was standard. We're playing Modern today. You've played a lot of Modern. You play a pretty, in my experience of watching you play a variety of decks.
Yeah.
You're not a one deck person. Like, what deck's been the most fun for you in the last few years in Modern?
Well, we've had so many fluxes in Modern specifically with like unbans and bans.
Yeah.
So I played a lot of KCI. That was banned. Usually I play just whatever like the most broken or the best deck is, and then it ends up getting banned, specifically in Modern. Because in my opinion, they do the best job in Modern with kind of like keeping the power level, or with bans specifically. So they do a good job taking care of the health of the format.
So have you had a deck banned out from under you more than once?
Oh yeah, every single ban I'm playing whatever got banned.
Okay, so then I'll change the question. What banning was the most brutal for you as far as what you felt like you were going to accomplish in the near future with a deck?
Okay. I think the most personal ban to me was Mox Opal. I think my favorite deck in Modern is definitely Lantern Control. So, it's not something that necessarily was like the most broken in the format ever. But it was my favorite.
I don't have chat in front of you. I'm sure that like your first impression now with these is not positive.
I think I'm probably a bunch of people's favorite commentator now because it says Lantern Control or Mox Opal. But there's been a bunch. I played Hogak the weekend that it got banned. I played Urza, the Oko deck the weekend that got banned. So
basically, instead of doing the madness bracket of like the most broken decks of the last 10 years, we could have just done your play history and basically had the same thing.
Oh, exactly. Every single deck I probably played. The only deck I did not play that got banned was Colorless Eldrazi.
Mm-hmm. Now, are either of your GP top 8s with a banned Modern deck?
Yes. I top 8'd a Modern tournament with Urza, but it was before the printing of Throne, so there was no Okos. It was just Astrolabe and Mox Opal were in the deck that have been banned.
All right, so no stranger to the banned cards is Justin Porchas. So his opinions on the Madness bracket should be pretty good. We're gonna get round 5 rolling just as soon as the players are ready to go. It doesn't seem like they're quite there yet. Justin, you played a couple different decks. I know, just the format. I know I watched you play a little bit this week.
Yeah, we hung out a bit.
So like, if you've been playing in this event, what deck were you high on leading into this weekend?
I think the most robust of the decks that I played this weekend or the week leading up to today is probably Green White Heliod.
Yeah.
I think the blue red prowess deck was probably it felt like the most powerful to Goldfish.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some kind of anemic draws that you have with like not having more than 16 creatures, for instance, and like definitely needing like a 1-drop prowess creature to like kind of like enable your draw.
Right.
So I would probably have picked one of those of the decks that I played over the weekend. The most fun deck that I played was definitely Dimir Inverter.
Okay, in Modern.
In Modern.
Okay. I guess you can't really play it. It's banned in Pioneer, right?
It's banned in Pioneer.
So,
Actually,
so when you're just looking for deck to play, even if the cards are banned in other formats, that's still what you gravitate towards.
oh, I mean, if it's banned in another format, that means it's good, right?
Yeah,
That's
sure,
that's a that's a draw.
All right, so we're not quite ready for the round yet. So let's go ahead and bring up Justin's portion of the Modern Madness bracket. So again, we're whole 8 new decks compared to what we had this morning. So if we have that ready, here it is. If you want to see, look at the deck list yourself, type in exclamation point madness in the chat. But so we see Justin's bracket here. We're starting on the top left. So we have Lantern Control, which you just spoke about, and Splinter Twin. So let's go ahead and look at the matchup of Lantern Control and Splinter Twin. Look at our deck lists that we have. We have Zach Elsick's list from 6 years ago in Oklahoma City.
The breakout performance of the deck for sure.
Right. Flushed with Mox Opals. And is that the only banned card we have in the deck? Seems underpowered compared to some of the things we've seen today.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Like the Mox Opal ban was personal because it kind of, like it was one of those things where you say you like ban the enabler, not the payoff.
Mm-hmm.
Where you like ban Opal and like you just annihilate things like Affinity, Lantern Control, any like weird artifact deck that did not have, like Astrolabe and Urza. So it kind of was a particular sting, I think, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a deck, and I'm gonna remember these are decks that like were important at the time, and so 6 years ago, I mean, well now Oko's banned, but if Oko had existed, this would have just Oko would have been a nightmare for a deck like this, which is trying to just is basically a prison deck. We're assembling a collection of effectively unplayable artifacts,
Sure,
which
the
in
mill rocks, yeah.
combination allow you to prevent your opponent from drawing relevant cards. That's basically what we're doing.
Yeah, you kind of look to set up a lock with Ensnaring Bridge. At the time, Modern was a format that was, 100% creature centric. Like you did have some outliers and like Trump, which is just unwinnable for Lantern Control. But yeah, they have two answers that can destroy an Ensnaring Bridge. So you set up, your lock. You put an Ensnaring Bridge onto the battlefield, and then if you can prevent them from drawing their two Abrupt Decays, they can't win the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you just win at your leisure with Ether Grid or decking, whichever one comes up. But yeah, certainly a deck that is frustrating to play against once you're kind of like locked up, and probably drew a lot of ill will just for that. I mean, I think a lot of time players would rather, if the game is, they would rather be killed than be locked up and left to rot.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing worse than kind of just like knowing your fate is sealed.
Yeah.
My favorite, like on-camera match of Lantern Control specifically was when Luis Salvato won the Pro Tour. And he's playing against Jerry Thompson in the finals. And, Jerry Thompson, no stranger to Modern, no stranger to, this deck in particular. And he just like would get locked out, on turn 4 and then kind of just like look up at the cover and be like, you guys still want me to play?
Yeah. It can be brutal to sit down across from once you're basically recover your routes to victory shut off. So Lantern Control playing against, I already forgot, so I'll wait for it to bring up Splinter Twin. So this is a deck that everyone begs to be unbanned. Well, not everyone, but certainly there's a vocal contingent of players who, many of whom probably didn't even play back at this point.
Sure.
Who want Splinter Twin unbanned. They want to be able to play this deck. This is from February 2015. A Pro Tour winning list in the hands of Antonio Del Moral Leon. And yeah, this is a elegant, mid-range-ish control deck that just has a win.
Yeah, I think this is the first bread and butter combo deck that kind of put like a particular hold on the format. You weren't able to do things because you knew that Splinter Twin existed.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't play this like cool control deck that kind of like took over the game and went long because you just could not beat turn 3 Pestermite, turn 4 Splinter Twin.
Mm-hmm.
Lightning Bolt was kind of the premier removal spell in the format. White wasn't really playable at this time, so people didn't really play Path to Exile. and that meant that Deceiver Exarch kind of just ran roughshod over the format. People were playing these removal spells, or creature decks that had 4 lightning bolts in them as their only removal, and you just can't beat a Deceiver Exarch ever.
Yeah. And I remember even playing back then when I was first getting into playing Tron, green-red Tron, and there was the red. You had to play the red removal spell that was like uncounterable in order to be able to have. To have an answer to
Yeah.
Exarch, and even that's iffy. But yeah, it's interesting. We've had 2 bluish like mid-range or control decks in this Madness bracket so far. Both of them had 2 Cryptic Commands.
Yeah, the Splinter Twin deck kind of did a couple different things through its evolution in the format. And, like at first they were playing like Kiki Jiki as well, and things like multiple dispels in the and like kind of like fork style cards to just like protect you. Mizium Skin comes to mind. But it was just like all in on the combo plan. And what kind of happened through its evolution with Snapcaster Mage, Vendilion Click, and the Cryptic Commands, you kind of just became this combo control deck that had inevitability in the form of, Keranos when that got printed, Snapcaster Mage, Cryptic Command.
Yeah. No, it had a lot of tools, and it also just would win with just damage sometimes in the air, which was super irritating.
Yeah, Pestermite and Lightning Bolt went a long way.
Yeah. All right, so we've got our standings after round 4. Let's go ahead and bring those up before we start round 5. Mike Hall, who we did see play within the last round, I believe, beating the Hammer deck, is on top of the tiebreaker race, but tied up in points with Owen Turcotte, Caleb Yetman, and Victor Cochran, several of these decks we saw at some point. And Lydia, the Storm player that we saw during the last round, who really couldn't get off the ground very well in that match due to some unfortunate draws, is on top of the tiebreakers of the players that are 3-1. So as we move on through the rest of the event, we're going to be watching Owen and Caleb from near the top of the standings in this next round. Once that gets ready to go, we don't have deck list quite ready to go yet, but you can see the standings of the top 32. Samuel Party, or we'll keep going further. Samuel Party's very interesting Yorion 80 card not exactly singleton, but
tutor deck.
Yeah, there was 20 or so singletons in the deck. Has unfortunately only managed to go 2-2 so far, which maybe those. I mean, who knows? When you're playing a deck like that, maybe your expectations are to have a good time with your day, and you're not expecting to do well. But he is 2-2.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Pardee is another person that's definitely not a stranger to the bands, right?
Right. Yeah. So you see there are the top 48 of the 70 players that we have today, and we'll get to the deck list when we have them. But we see from the top of the standings we have Green White Heliod and a Jund Death Shadow. No surprise either way there. Heliod. Oh, here we go, and we have it ready. Owen Turcotte playing Green White Heliod. The deck to beat going into the weekend, not by an overwhelming margin, I would say, or at least it's beatable. And I think a beatable deck to beat is not a problem for a format.
For sure. I want to jump right over to this sideboard.
Okay.
We see Deicide, which is an excellent answer to the mirror. Looking up and down the standings, the tournament's completely littered with Green White Heliod. And knowing that it's the deck to beat, having that nail in the coffin sideboard card for the mirror, I think is going to be invaluable for Owen moving forward and probably into the top 8. If we see any more Green White Heliod sneak in there.
I don't know if we can pop Heliod up Deicide up on the screen with the deck list, but Deicide, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a 2-mana instant. And it exiles an enchantment, and if the enchantment is a god, I believe, then you can strip all the remaining copies from
hand, graveyard, library.
And so, if that is pulled off on Heliod, then the combo kill is disabled.
And I mean, in the mirror, you can beat infinite life. Just because you get rid of the Heliods and then you execute your own combo.
Yeah. So that is cool. That's a good thing to point out. Okay, and Owen, that's not going to be relevant this round. He's playing against Jund Death Shadow, I believe. Here we have it from Caleb Yetman. and both sets of Death Shadows. Death Shadow decks have certainly seen their variety of colors and now numbers of Death Shadows over the years. I don't think we see too many non-Scourge decks anymore, but maybe there's some out there.
Yeah, Grixis definitely fell by the wayside. It has a lot to do, I think, with Lurrus. So Gurmag Igler was the premier threat or second threat in Grixis Death Shadow alongside Stubborn Denial.
Right.
But with the inclusion of Lurrus, you can't afford to play Gurmag Igler in the format, I don't think.
Yeah, and we don't see, for a little while we saw the Black-Red Death Shadow, and I believe when Nathan Stewart won
the
our
dual tournament
showdown,
right?
at the end of the last year, and that was the Black-Red Death Shadow with both styles of Shadow plus the Bowman Couriers. And Bowman Courier, that deck just kind of just doesn't seem to show up much anymore. Maybe Bowman Courier was determined just to be not quite strong enough for the format overall. And there's just, like, if you look at this deck list, there aren't weak cards in this deck.
Yeah, you look at maybe the Seal of Fire, innocuous, but great with Tarmogoyf and great with Lurrus. So it makes the cut.
Yeah. All right. So game 1 is ready to kick off at the beginning of round 5 of our event today. Thanks for being with us. And let's see how things play out. We're going to be watching from Owen Turcotte's point of view. Now, we've watched a little bit of Green-White today, and I would say that the draws haven't exactly come together spectacularly well when we've had Green-White on here. So let's see if Owen gets a little better. And you're right, it does.
I was going to say before we kind of cut to everything that, having the main deck REAC champions in this new iteration of Heliod kind of really stabilized a couple tough matchups, this being one of them, where you get to kind of just hold down the fort forever unless they draw Battle Rage. But that's not going to be the case now.
Yeah, or a Tarmogoyf. Yeah, and that's another reason why the Black-Red Shadow would be struggling, is that people are playing main deck Oriot champions. Having just Black-Red is going to be tough. All right, another Thoughtseize. This one rather inconsequential, but
meant to see a Shadow here.
Pretty smooth start for Caleb here. Yeah, doesn't get much better than that. So, how is Owen going to proceed here? Drawing a feeder is something, because that's, at least there are combo avenues with Spike Feeder.
Yeah, I think Caleb's best friend, or I'm sorry, not Caleb. Owen's best friend moving forward is just going to be the top of this deck.
Yeah.
With Thoughtseize, the only way that we're going to get out of this kind of being stripped at the beginning is kind of top decking the Heliod and hoping that there's not a lightning bolt specifically. Okay.
Well, there it goes. All right, so this is definitely going to be tough. Realistically, Owen is the only card Owen wants to draw here is Collect Company, as that's the best way for him to come back in this game. As he's at 22, but he's probably got. Maybe he's got 3 turns, but
yeah, Skyclave Apparition, another great answer to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Well, that is the best one that Owen could have found there. Caleb with only 1 card left in hand. So if this company hits hard, then it might be tough to recover. We're going to run this out main phase. How do you feel about this?
I think that I would want the attack. There are some scenarios where you can get a couple cards, specifically the ARG champion, to block in like a profitable way. Obviously, we have a pretty good hit here where we're going to find the Ballista with the Ranger Captain. But if there was an REAC champion, you want the Death Shadow tapped to try to maybe sneak in some damage.
Sure.
And this way, Caleb can draw Thoughtseize.
Right. Yeah, and that given that the tutor was found, the Thoughtseize would have hit the Ballista anyway. But it's possible, maybe, that Caleb just wouldn't bother casting it, and Owen could fire off the company end of turn and not be disrupted at all. I don't know how realistic that is, but it's at least we've seen some unexpected things happen already today. But this has dramatically changed the pace of this game now.
Yeah, 1 card left. We haven't drawn for turn. If we're talking about Caleb, but we have an avenue for victory. We need 2 more mana. to execute the combo. So we're not going to be able to play a 2/2 Ballista and give it lifelink on the next turn unless we draw something like Utopia Sprawl.
But we do have, we have a blocker, and then next turn we can the Arbor Elf is not necessary to win the turn after, so we have a chump blocker for next turn also. So it seems like potentially that Owen can get himself out of this. Certainly a block could have happened there. I can understand not. Whoa, that's a lot of stuff now.
Yeah. Well, the Noble helps. So we have access to 5 mana. I think, playing a 2/2 Ballista and having 2 blockers, is that enough?
I feel like it's not.
I don't think it is. There might be an avenue to victory that involves giving the Ranger Captain lifelink.
Right. Yeah. So if we play Ballista for 1, and then
give it lifelink, or give the Ranger Captain lifelink and put the counter on the Ballista. If you survive to untap, you can just give the Ballista that's now a 2/2 lifelink and win.
Right.
But we have to see if that's even possible.
Because that would put, if Owen were to game 3 and go to 10, it actually looks like that wouldn't be enough either.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if there was a Dried Arbor in this deck. I don't think so.
There's not.
Yeah, so let's see. How else can we make this work? We have a land drop here. We can go Hierarch, Ballista for 1, and give lifelink.
Does that tap the Dried Arbor? It would.
The Arbor Elf, you mean?
Oh yeah, the Arbor Elf.
Just
because we need a couple blocks.
You're right. Well, but that would still work because we can give the lifelink in combat. So the Arbor Elf could block and then give lifelink that.
Oh, you're right. Yep.
Then we would need the Ballista would only have 1 counter. No, again.
It comes in at 1, and then the Heliod is going to trigger off of the Ranger Captain having lifelink.
All right, so that was close. Let's go ahead and spell this out then straight from the beginning. So what we're thinking is, if Owen makes his 4th land drop, plays Noble Hierarch and Walking Ballista as a 1/1, that requires 3 mana, leaving 1 plus the Arbor Elf. Then if he goes block with both of the mana creatures and the Ranger Captain, let 1 creature through, activate Heliod on Ranger Captain to give it lifelink, that should allow him to survive and give a counter to the Ballista, which means if Caleb doesn't draw anything of relevance, then Owen should have the win rolled up for the next turn. That's what we're thinking, right?
Yeah, that's a line of victory. Should Caleb not draw a removal spell. So let's hope that Caleb, we see the line, on Owen's side.
There may be other alternative plays here that can be made. Now, obviously, Owen is doing something else, so perhaps there's another route that also functions, or maybe. Yeah.
I think you get so caught up in kind of like sandbagging the Ballista. A lot of combo decks, like in the past with Devoted Druid, or like any iteration of this like kind of green-white company deck that has like an infinite combo. You don't want to you get so scared to put your cards out on the table or onto the battlefield. And sometimes you get kind of lost in the ability to just play out a Ballista, and if it untaps, you win.
I can't confidently make out how large those targoids are right now, but I don't think they're humongous.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess 4.
Yeah, so I think they're manageable. We are watching this. Okay. So the Heart's gonna live. Okay, this is
another line to victory.
Yeah. So this should work. This is another way to accomplish. Similarly to what we're saying, it's less mana is available this turn, but it'll be made up for by the Hierarch surviving. And
yeah, so I think the important thing to note is specifically to combo off with Walking Ballista and Heliod, the Walking Ballista has to have 2 counters on it. So we weren't able to effectively execute our combo last turn since we didn't have the requisite 6 mana.
Right. But there it is achieved here. So yeah, and so Owen does take this one down.
Yeah.
Good for him. So again, like what the route that Justin and I had spelled out looked like it would have worked. Owen had a different route, which also worked. So good for him. He takes on the first game. Let's go and look at the sideboard, see what we have cooking for Caleb to alter this matchup, which, I mean, Oreo champions are beating main deck. However, there's an answer.
You have the K returns. Yeah.
Right. Kozilek's Return, a Pyroclasm type effect to damage to creatures, but it is devoid, so it's a colorless source. Oreo champions will not be protected from it. And that not only does that kill Oreo champion, it kills quite a few creatures in Owen's deck. And
yeah, everything outside of the Ranger Captain, right, has 2 or less toughness. Kills Spike Feeder, kills the 2/2 Conclave Mentor. This is a case for Genda Shadow where you have, 11 sideboard cards that you can bring in. And it really just depends on what you're trying to do. Things that don't really look great to me are like the Croxa, and some of the targeted discard. Okay, looks like we're jumping straight to the game 2.
Excellent. All right. So we have.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say we have from Owen's side we have a Veil of Summer in hand, and yet we're watching from Owen's point of view. We do watch all our events at Nerd Rage from a forced perspective from one player or the other to increase the ability of, as a viewer and a commentator, to put yourself in the shoes of one player and decide, do I agree with what they're doing? What kind of tension, what are they having to think about, and what obstacles are they facing? So Owen was able to navigate that first game. He has the Veil here held up. I mean, he has no alternatives anyway, but certainly this would be, from his perspective, a great time for a discard spell to be cast.
Yeah. We see a pretty strong hand compared to the game 1 opener that we had. There's a lot more going on here, right? There's the champion that was in the first hand, but we now have a Skyclave Apparition, a Heliod, and a Ranger Captain. So it's kind of, for me, it seems like we're going to have a pretty tough time coming from Jund Shadow.
Right.
You have a lot of cards that you kind of care about now.
Yeah, and we're already saying, okay, just to start with, you have to have Kozilek's Return or you're not getting through. And Caleb's going to pass. So keep in mind, if you're not experienced or you're slipping of your mind with that prowess, and the Kozilek's Return will not kill the Monster Swift Spear in any scenario because we'll always prowess up and survive. But here we are, and the Ballista's drawn, and we play the Heliod, and yeah, things are looking pretty smooth for Owen as far as developing this turn, and Caleb just is stuck for the moment.
Yeah, we'll have to see what kind of answers. I didn't get to see if there was a Deglammer in the sideboard of Jund Shadow. I did hear that you were talking about Deglammer previous in the broadcast, and this is actually why it's kind of risen in popularity as the naturalized answer of choice, because you get rid of the indestructible god.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there we have 2 sideboard cards from Caleb, both the Kozilek's Return and the Deglammer, clearing out Owen's board. Owen still has a lot of action in hand, but kind of got reset a little bit there. Fortunately, did not take much damage in the process. And, okay, Ranger Captain. So the options are going to be a backup Ballista or a mana creature.
Or the Giant Killer.
Or the Giant Killer. And Giant Killer, I mean, anything that's of relevant size, that's going to take down. So that looks like a pretty good pickup. Pretty
scary that we have 3 removal spells that are just excellent against the creature suite of Death Shadow. The Apparition, Path to Exile, and the Giant Killer, all very, very effective against Death Shadow, Tarmogoyf, and the Skyclave. Our only problem is that we're not drawing mana.
Right. Owen can't find a land, but he's got plenty of stuff to play with. And it looked like Caleb picked up Luris on his turn, which is not going to survive long, but I guess he'll be able to get something out of it.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think that you don't want to play the Skyclave Apparition on something that costs 3 mana if you can avoid it. just because you don't want to give your opponent a free 3/3. Like in this case, they're getting just a 1/1 illusion. We do see a pretty good draw from Caleb in the Seal of Fire. That's going to be pretty nice to have with the Lurrus. You know, we didn't have something proactive to be casting every turn. So we get a free one, even if it gets Path exiled here.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. It's a free card, but this is... Caleb is really not looking very good this game.
Yeah, I think we're kind of seeing that crux of, you know, how many answers do I bring in versus like how much am I diluting my deck? You know, we saw things like the Cosmic Return into Declaimer, you know, at the end of Caleb's third turn, but we didn't do anything before that.
Yeah.
So, you know, what are you giving up sideboarding all these cards to have an answer?
And we're throwing out a Ballista into a Seal of Fire. Obviously, you take out the token on the way out, but this is... Caleb can't be happy about this either. My opponent doesn't even care about his Ballista. How am I supposed to compete when he's just willing to throw away?
Sure. You know, I think that might have been a misstep from Owen.
You think it was just
he overlooked the Seal of Fire turn?
Yeah.
You know, it might be something as innocuous as you don't want to pass the turn without making a proactive play, especially when, you know, you haven't been drawing mana sources to kind of like be double spelling and, you know, churning through the cards that are in your hand, and you feel like you're not using your cards.
Right. So you think you just played out there without really thinking too much about it, and he doesn't have a Heliod, so maybe it's not worth trying to slow play in your hand, because it's not like cards are super safe in your hand in this matchup anyway.
Sure. Yeah, I just feel like, you know, you're playing against Death Shadow. They don't have a creature. They have 4 cards in hand. The only likely solution is that they just have, you know, a bunch of removal spells in their hand that they're kind of just sandbagging, waiting to use. We don't see one fired off there at the end of the turn, though. So that kind of might be indicative of what's in Caleb's hand. It might be some, you know, number of lands. We don't really know.
It's hard to imagine there'd be too many more, because this is not a land-heavy deck, and there's already 6 on the board.
Yeah, and the fetch lands have been used.
But yeah, with no play, there really isn't much going on. There's another Heliod, sure. I mean, that's fine. I guess the Heliod density has increased in the deck since Declaimer does put an extra one back in there.
Yeah, it shuffles it back in, sure.
All right, Caleb, what do you have for us? I'll land. I mean, there are also, like you're saying, the sideboard cards. There could be additional copies of Kozilek's Return in hand. And, you know, any removal spell except Declaimer is obviously worthless at this point.
Yeah.
Just because Owen has nothing going. I mean, yeah, Owen has nothing to... Both players. No one is willing to put anything on the board in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even having the Giant Killer on the field, it's just a card that you can grow. When you have Heliod just sitting in play, you know, you want to use that activated ability. I think it's kind of overlooked. You can make your small creatures bigger over the course of a couple turns, and we have an opponent that's at 6 life.
Yeah.
We attack for 1, then we attack for 2, and then now we're attacking for lethal.
Yeah, and this is... Okay, we got something here. This is a pause, maybe another Declaimer. But if both players just try and... Oh, it's Tarmogoyf. Okay. So that's a proactive card that, I mean...
Giant Killer.
Yeah.
It's going to get chopped down.
Caleb can't just let this game play out and both players draw cards, because eventually Owen will draw Collect Company, cast it end of turn, and that might prove to be difficult for Caleb to deal with. Took me a second to figure out what was happening here.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Also relevant that it counters the adventure.
Yeah, that was
excellent. Now we don't have access to the second half of the card.
Yeah, I have not seen that happen before, but good job by Caleb. Countering Giant Killer with Dismember. So, unfortunately for Caleb, Owen has plenty more interaction as Skyclave takes down the Tarmogoyf, and it's just... Owen's deciding here whether he wants to play the Ranger Vios, and he decides to hold up Veil of Summer instead. That seems reasonable either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could have, silenced the Death Shadow player Okay, well, wouldn't have worked. So kudos to Owen for being patient.
Yeah, it's funny. Usually you think Veil of Summer, when you board it in, it's good against basically the bulk of your opponent's, interaction cards. But here we have Kozak's Return and the Glamour, and
Sure.
Veil of Summer has
And
nothing to
lightning
do.
bolt.
Yeah. There's another Kozak's Return. Not killing its intended target, but whatever. It's a creature on the board, but this collected company is looming, and
Yeah, I think we're just unfortunately kind of getting ground to dust.
yeah.
There are so many 2-for-1s in this Heliod deck. I think that's part of the reason that it's so robust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this Jund Shadow deck's just not built to play on turn 13.
Right. Yeah, might seem like it's bad to get an Arbor Elf, but you're also getting a Ranger Captain that finds another card.
Right, and this is just there's another Ballista, sure, and now Caleb needs a discard spell just to not be dead, and even if he has it, he's still in huge trouble, and I guess there's a counter for the discard spell anyway, so Caleb seems unlikely to survive the next turn. Veil of Summer was the first card drawn in the opening hand of Owen this game, and it sat there the whole time. Is there? Oh. Okay, sure. There's the third Kozilek's Return. And that's, something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that we get to protect our Ballista.
Yeah. Now it can run out for 6 mana as a 3/3, which is half of Caleb's life total guaranteed to go down here. There is there's really no opportunity to hold on to this Ballista here, as you want to let it run into an Inquisition or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of put. I mean, not to say that you don't have more eggs, but you're putting more eggs, or you're putting one egg, all your eggs in a basket when you just play one creature.
Yeah.
Who've played, paid 6 mana and played the Spike Feeder and the Ranger Captain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where we have an embarrassment of riches, so I don't think that it's going to matter the order of the spells.
Yeah, Caleb is just running out of cards. Partially because he's drawn a few more lands than he wanted, but also in large part because, like you're saying, Owen, there are 2-for-1s. There are just any number of things that find more things. Collecting Company, Ranger Vios. Is Ranger Vios, like we saw there, Ranger Vios is worth a card on its own, plus whatever it tutors for.
Right.
Now this one, I believe, only has an elf left to find. So.
Right. But I mean, even the Arbor Elf, is kind of scary when you're at 3 life.
And the Spike Feeder. I mean, Spike Feeders when your opponent's at lower life. Yeah, the fact that you can move counters around, that actually not the most commonly seen ability.
So I think we saw all 3 Kozilek's Returns.
We did.
Having the information in an open deckless tournament, I might have played the Arbor Elf knowing that it can't be swept away.
Sure. That's a good point. Caleb has not drawn I guess he drew 1 Tarmogoyf, but he hasn't drawn
a creature.
A Shadow-type creature this game. And yeah, I think this is it. I suppose it wouldn't take too much. Oh, I know, because a Bolt isn't going to do it. So Smember will do it.
Well, we have Veil.
Oh, except we have the Veil Summer this turn. Yeah. And that is the end. So, yeah, Caleb unable to get much going there, unable to really gain any traction on the board, and it's just ground down, like you said. Owen Turcotte wins this match without. I mean, played carefully, played it well, but in game 2 was never really in any danger, and that's something that I feel like one signature aspect of the Shadow decks is that you're generally afraid playing against them,
mm-hmm.
and this game there was just nothing to fear at all.
Yeah, we weren't walking the tightrope.
No.
As the matchup sometimes kind of dictates normally, where you have to deal with a big creature and they have some spot removal for your setup or your combo specifically. And yeah, there was just not that pressure
Yeah.
from the Death Shadow deck this time around.
No, definitely not. All right. Well, unfortunately, our backup matches are finished, but we do have the Modern Madness bracket. So let's go ahead and knock out
Yeah,
another
let's
one of our
jump into
matches
some
on here.
decks.
Again, exclamation mark madness in the chat if you would like to see the deck list yourself. Let's go to the bottom left where we have Blue Red Delver against Malirapod. So let's go ahead and pop up one of
So we
those
better be talking about
lists.
Treasure Cruise. Okay, we are.
We have Izzet Delver. We do have Treasure Cruise. We do have Gitaxian Probe. We have no reason to want to play fair by any means. And so we have 12 1-drops. We have some Pyromancers and a lot of efficient spells.
Yeah, I mean, this is a deck that, the Power of Treasure Cruise, it didn't exist in, any format for very long, for good reason. But it kind of took over Modern and Legacy. That we had to have multiple bans in both of the formats, in very close proximity with Dig Through Time, Treasure Cruise, Gitaxian Probe, kind of all hitting, in short order in a row.
Yeah. Now we have Pillar of Flame in this deck. As now, is my memory right? Pillar of Flame is a 2 damage sorcery that exiles a creature if it kills it. Is that right?
Yeah.
So is that here for? I assume, that's here for Kitchen Finks.
Kitchen Finks. So this existed in close proximity to Birthing Pod and other styles.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So we have Pascal Maynard's Izzet Delver deck from January 2015 facing Jacob Wilson,
Kitchen
who
Finks.
actually I think Jacob Wilson might be in this collection of decks twice. So
yeah, I did see him earlier.
Yeah. So here we have from February 2014, so a year earlier, Malirapod in all its glory before Birthing Pod was banned. And this almost the same collection of cards existed later on with different enablers.
Sure.
With
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but this is kind of probably the strongest version of it, as not many other cards can replicate the functionality of Birthing Pod.
I think this is the strongest version. Pod specifically, I wouldn't say that it's the strongest version of Pod. Funny enough, I think what put Pod over the kind of apex in terms of modern power level was Siege Rhino. No one was really clamoring for bans until they printed Siege Rhino. We had a format with Siege Rhino, Birthing Pod, Dig Through Time, Blue Deck, Scape Shift. That was probably the most powerful version of Modern we've had, maybe since before Oko.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to see, we have the kind of classic, as you would remember it, Birthing Pod deck, and it's not even the strongest version.
Sure. Okay, so Izzet Delver versus Malirapod. Who do you want to be?
Well, I think in the matchup, I want to be Birthing Pod.
Okay.
Just because you kind of have a lot of longevity against other creature decks. You do have the ability to get ground out by things like trading resources, and then they fill back up with Treasure Cruise. But Birthing Pod was just so good at dispatching the aggro creature decks. So I want to be Birthing Pod.
All right. So how else can we phrase that then? So in the matchup, you want Birthing Pod. Mm-hmm. At each of the respective times, do you have enough context for those time periods to know which one you'd want to be?
Yeah. So Birthing Pod was probably the most prolific in terms of win rate in Modern, but it was it shared the metagame share with things like Splinter Twin, Jund, Tron, where Blue Red Delver kind of just once it burst onto the scene with Treasure Cruise, that was it. Mm-hmm. So I think the health of the format, it was a healthier format when Pod was around because it existed in this kind of macro with other powerful cards.
Yeah.
When Treasure Cruise was kind of just like the best thing that you could do, and we saw it with the bans.
Right.
They banned Probe and Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, and it was hard to fight against. It's hard to fight against just cheap card advantage when you're in like the Delver backed up in the Delver deck and all that. It's just, yeah, it's tough. It's like
the fact that they can play a Pyromancer refuel and then they just have 3 more tokens.
Yeah, it's like the blue-red Delver deck we have now, except it's on steroids, or the blue-red prowess deck. Yeah. Anyway, all right, so there you have it for our second portion of that bracket. We'll get to the rest of that as the day goes on. We're going to step away now for a few minutes, and then we'll be back for round 6. That was 5 rounds, right? Yeah, we have round 6 coming up.